Hello there everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to make these multi-strand connectors using wire, and this is what they can look like. So these are just the ones that I've made, this size, and I've got 5 loops here, so you can obviously do that, but you can really make however many loops you want to. You can make less or more. I'm just going to show you the technique of how to do them. It's quite simple and can be really useful to be able to make your own to fit whatever project you need them for. So if you want to learn how to make these connectors, then keep watching. So all we need to make these connectors is 2 gauges of wire. Now they're both regular round wire, and I'm just working with a silver coated copper wire here. So the first one is a 0.8mm. This is going to be the base wire and kind of make the structure of the piece. And then this is a 0.4mm. We're going to just use a little bit of this to wrap it around and hold it together. So let's get our wires together and let's get started. So the main tool that I'm going to be using to make these as well is my 6-step bail making pliers here. Now you can easily use round nose pliers. The only reason that I prefer using these is because we're going to make loops after each other. You want to make sure to get them as even as possible, so the same size loops, and these are perfect for that, and you can choose whatever size you want them to be. I'm going to go for the smallest one in this case, but by using that, every time you make a loop you make sure they become the exact same size. Now if you don't have this tool and you would like it, I'm just going to put a link in the description box below the video here, and you can find where you can buy it. So you can also, like I said, use round nose pliers or whatever other pliers, bail making pliers or whatever you have. This is just what I'm going to be using. So then first of all we need to get a length out of a 0.8mm wire here. And now this isn't a really specific length to this, it doesn't have to be that much, but it really depends on how many loops or the size of connector that you want to make. But just a decent length of about maybe 20 to 30 centimeters or so. Then what I'm going to do is get my 6-step bail making pliers here. Like I said, I'm going to be using the smallest size on this, and then I'm going to work towards one end of my wire first, and then we just need to start making some loops. So I just form my wire around my pliers here until we have the short end coming back out, and we need to make sure that we have a full complete circle. So our wires on the top here actually overlap. We have 2 wires going on top of each other. So this is your first loop. We can see we have a full circle coming from the one side, going around, and then continuing back out the other side of the circle there. Now we need to move on to make the next circle, the next loop there. And this is where you want to decide how much spacing you want between your loops as well. Now I prefer there to not be too much spacing, but that's completely up to you. But I'm going to place my pliers where I want my next loop to be. So roughly something like this. And then I'm going to take my long end back over the top to create my next loop, and again make it a full circle. So that means that your wire's coming from one side making that loop and going back on top of itself. So you get on around the top here, we basically have 2 wires lying right next to each other, but from the front you won't really be able to see that. So that's the next loop. Now going to make another one, and again this is then where you want to try and get your spacing between your loops even as you can. So just kind of gauge this by eye. Place your pliers where you feel the next loop needs to be, and then form your circle. Go all the way around and then some to make it a complete circle, and then you can just check if you have the nice spacing between your loops. Now if you've been fortunate enough to do that, then that's fine. Otherwise what you can do, say if you've made a little bit too far spacing between the next 2 here compared to the first ones, you can put your pliers back in and then basically roll it inwards a little bit, the loop, or open it out if you need to have further spacing, but roll it along the top wires there until you're happy with it. And it's going to look something like this. So in this case I'm just going to use these 3 loops because I want a 5 loop connector, but it's at this point where you can really make as many loops as you want to. So say if you wanted a 7 loop connector in total, you need to make 5 here first, and then the second part I'm going to show you how to do, we make 1 at each end. So we just need to make however many we want, minus 2 along the middle here to begin with. So that's what you want to decide now, how large you want your connector to be. So once you're happy with this, we then need to just finish this off. And also what you want to make sure is along the top of all these loops that you basically have a straight line. So every time you make a loop, your wire goes straight across from the previous line before the loop and go on to make the next loop. So just make sure of that. So you get a nice straight line there around the top of the loops. So this is then the middle point. So what we can do now is just finish off the ends. And to do this, I'm going to get my flush cutters, or if you have some wire cutters you can use them. And then we need to cut off the excess here going along from the edges, the end loops there. And basically what we want to do is finish off on the circle itself. So we don't want any wire sticking out from this. So on one side we basically have this very finished loop right at the end that's complete. And then I want to take my cutters, and where I want to cut off the excess wire, it's not on the outside of this loop. We actually want to cut this just where basically the wire goes up and meets, and then the wire starts kind of overlapping there, two wires next to each other. So that's where we want to cut it, just where the wire is going to meet up towards that. Once you cut it, so something like this. So it's still a complete circle, but the very end where we cut it now basically butts up against itself, so the top line across there. And then I'm going to just take some chain nose pliers and grab this, because right now it's kind of sticking out. I'm going to grab the very end and just push it down a bit, flatten it out so it's a flat circle, and the very end now really buds up against itself along the top. And then that's the completed loop on one end. We need to do the same on the other side. So just go in the back there, cut off the wire where it's going to meet against the top line. Just like we did on the other side. And then again, get your chain nose or flat nose and then flatten this out basically. So we have this nice circle shape, but it ends up against itself, so we don't have any of the ends of the wire sticking out anywhere that's going to be able to catch or scratch on anything. So this is the middle part of our connector. So now we need to make the outer part that's going to connect together to make the complete piece. So we then need to get another length of a 0.8mm out to do that, and quite often you can just use the excess that you cut off of this little piece. That's sufficient enough because it's not much more we're going to need anyway. So now we need to make that top part. So what I'm going to do is again get my 6-step bail making pliers out, and for this one you can quite easily use the same size on your loop there, but the main loop on the other side that's going to be a single loop I want to make a little bit larger, so I'm going to use the second smallest one in this case. I'm going to go in a little bit because what we need to do is make the loop that's going to sit in the middle of our connector but on the other side first. So we need to make sure we have enough wire on both sides to then finish it off, and then I'm going to just make this complete loop, so just like the other times where we have one full complete circle there and the wire is basically lapping over itself. So you have two wires on one of the sides. And then once we have this, we just need to make sure that both ends of a wire coming out from that circle is nice and straight. So when you look at it from the front here, again, the circle is connected to a straight line going across. So what we're going to have is this is going to end up sitting right on top of the midpoint of the middle piece there that we made. However many loops you made on this middle piece, it doesn't matter. This point is going to sit right in the middle of that. And then the legs are going to come out on each side there. We're going to finish it off. So that's where we're at now. So now what we need to do before we finish off the ends of this one, to make it a little bit easier, I just want to connect the two together. So of the 0.4mm we're going to be using for this, again we don't need very long length of this, maybe about 20 to 30 centimeters, and that's even too much, but we obviously need to have enough to work with as well. So I'm going to work more towards the middle of this wire as well, the 0.4mm wire. Make sure I have a length on both sides, as we're going to be working from about the middle again. So I'm going to grab the two pieces that I've made so far and put them together, and then first thing here is going to be a little bit fiddly because obviously they're loose now, but that's what we're going to connect them together now. I'm just going to hold them in place how I want them to sit, so that single loop sits in the middle above the first connector piece that we made. So just make sure they sit how you want them to sit, and then on the one side of the loop here, the top loop, I'm going to start wrapping my 0.4mm wire around both of these together. So what I'm going to be doing is wrapping in between the bottom loops and not through them or anything, so in between them. So keep hold of your wire and start wrapping it around the two wires basically together like this, and just keep hold of the other tail. Help hold it steady. And as you go, keep checking that it sits in the right place and it stays in the right place. It's going to move a little bit in the first few wraps, but that's fine. We can still just adjust it a bit. So I've just done a few wraps for now. We don't have to fill the whole space just yet there. And then I want to move over to the other side of that top loop because that's going to help secure it in place. So before you do this then, move over to the other side of that loop. We just need to make sure now that it does sit exactly where we want them to be connected so that it looks nice and even. So I'm going to keep hold of this then. My weaving wire, my point formula wire is coming around the top and around the back, and all I'm going to do is cross over. So instead of going through the gap on this side between the two loops, I'm just going to cross around the back, come up between the next gap between the next two loops, and then wrap around the two wires again. So basically the two straight lines kind of that we created on top of the loops on the other side of that top loop now, because this is going to help secure it in place nicely so we can keep working with it. And the amount of times you want to wrap here is not really a specific amount. You just want to wrap enough to basically fill in the gap between the two loops on the bottom there. So now it's actually quite nice and fastened together. It's going to be a lot more easy to work with. And then once you have this, what we need to do is then just finish off the ends here as well. So first off, I'm just going to get my chain nose pliers again, because we're just looking at an angle in there before we make the very last loop in each end. So just again double check you're happy with it before you do these angles. You want to make sure that's completely how you want it to be. So to do this, what we need to do is you want to make sure that both ends are nice and straight here first of all. So it forms that straight line on top, and if not, just take a bit of time to straighten them out. So then what we want to do is the same on both ends, but working with these lengths, the tails we have left of our 0.8mm from the top loop that we made. I'm going to place my pliers in and basically want to place them where it's going to be kind of a corner at the end, but you're going to still have space just on the inside there to make your very last loop. So make sure you have space for that, and also to ideally get an even gap in between. So this is kind of doing it a bit by eye. So just place your pliers, keep hold of your wire, and make your bend. Come straight down, so about a 90-degree angle you want. Something like this. That's going to be the corner. Now if you think this isn't going to be quite right, you can adjust it. So instead of making a too rough of a corner to begin with, just be gentle to begin with, and then you can bend out a little bit and then readjust where you want your bend to be. So you can just do a little bit of adjusting here, but obviously don't do too much of it, just until you think it's going to look right. And then we're going to do the same on the other side. I prefer to do the bend now, because it's easier to then get them as even as possible. Just bend this straight down as well. And then just have a look. I can see this when it's a little bit further out. So again, I'm just going to readjust this, bringing it further in towards the circles there. So that looks pretty good to me now. And then what we need to do is make a last circle on the outside, and we're going to use these legs to do that. And I just think that finishes it off nicely. So it's a continuous piece. And again, for them circles, take my 6-step bail making pliers and use the same size as I did on the small ones. So the main part of the connector here, I'm going to place that along the outside, so the leg that we bent down, but you want to just leave enough space so that basically the loop is going to be level with the other ones. So when we bend this long tail back around, you're going to have just a little tiny gap up there between the wire, the top straight line, and your pliers. That's the wire's going to fill that in, because that's going to be equivalent to the main part we did down here. Take your wire, bend it back around your pliers, and then all the way out to the side. So again, we get a complete circle, like that. And then we need to do the same on the other side as well. Remember to leave that little gap that's going to just fit the wire. So your circles become level. Have it come all the way out to the side. And again, if you've then found out that you made the circle too far down, so you get too much of a gap here and it's not quite level, all you do is put your pliers back in and you can just gently roll it upwards, or if you need to bring it down a bit. So that's how you make the loops on the side. So when you're happy with them, what we need to do then is the same thing as we did on the end ones and the mid part. We want to cut them off, but we need to cut the wire where it's going to butt up against itself, basically. So that means this wire is going to touch itself, the end of it, butt up against itself on the side. So I need to cut it all the way out here. Get a nice flush cut. So you can see we still have the full circle, but we have the end there. Same on the other side. Cut it where the wire is going to butt up against itself once you cut it, but still have a full circle. And then we just need to remember to flatten these down so we can't feel those ends of the wire. Flatten them down, bring it all the way in. Same on the other side. Because that way you keep your shape as well, you keep your circle there. And then it looks like this. And then basically we're almost done. If you have any final adjustments, do them now. But then we just need to finish our wrap here with the 0.4mm. So all you need to do, you've done the middle part here. Once you've filled out that gap between the bottom loops, move over to the next one. Now in my case here, I've reached the one where it's just a single wire now, because I've only got the 3 loops in the middle. So you just wrap around that on its own until you fill out that gap. It's the same principle if you had more loops in the middle, if you wanted a bigger connector. You just keep moving to the next one, to the next gap, and then filling it in. Same over here. Bring this around, fill out this gap all the way, and then around the back, make sure you always do these on the same side. So it's kind of going to have a little bit of a back and a front, but it's not going to be too obvious. Along the back, come around to the next gap, and then start wrapping that until it's filled out. So just like that. And then all that's left to do is cut off the excess of a 0.4mm. So I'm going to cut it off here. It's coming around towards the back as if it was going to wrap around another time. Going to cut it off, have just a tiny little bit of a tail left. I can feel it there. Going to take my chain nose, press it down, and then just roll it in the direction that the wire is going. So basically we're tucking it in as if it was going to make another wrap, but then also getting rid of that end of the 0.4mm. It's going to be hidden in there. Same thing on here. Cut it off, and then the little tail you're going to have left, make sure to squeeze that down. Otherwise that's going to catch or scratch on everything. And then basically, now you then have your finished connector. And like I said, you can do these whatever size you want to. You can make them really large or even smaller than this as well. Depends how many loops you need for your project. But then that's how you make your own multi-strand connector with a bit of wire. So it's as easy as that. It's a pretty simple way to do it. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching. Hello everyone. Today I want to show you how to make your own Wirework brooch pin. And this is what mine looks like. So you have your actual pin part down here, that opens up just like a regular brooch pin, and then connecting into this hook up there, so it's going to stay securely. And then along the top here I've made these loops just so that we can use this to attach to something. You need to have these loops to be able to attach, and also so this doesn't move around.